Welcome everyone. And in this session, you're going to look at the penalties. Now, the penalties question will be definitely in the tax process exam, and you have to be very much careful how to deal with that. So the first thing we're going to look at the table we have here, how we deal with the penalties. So we have a different type of penalties. We have a careless and deliberate error. We have an inaccurate VAT return. We have a late VAT return or payment, failure to register, and failure to keep and retain record. Now, the penalties involve mainly with this one, late VAT return or payment. And we're going to focus on this area today. So let's have a look. Just quickly read this one. So when it first occur, both either late VAT return, so I submit the return late, or I made the full payment late. In the exam, they can make you confused and they can tell you like they paid half. Remember that even you paid half, still you will get the penalty. So late return or the payment will be considered both for the penalty purpose. Sometimes in the exam, the question can say they submitted the VAT return on time but didn't make the payment. Remember that is the same thing. Either you submit late or either you make the payment late, it will give you the same penalty. Let's have a look how does it work. So when this first occurs, when it has happened first time, the trader is said to be a default. So for example, when you are late for the payment or for the VAT return, so trader is said to be default. So that means you will be in the warning period. A 12-month surcharge liability notice period is then started under the default surcharge scheme. It's like a 12-month notice, they'll give it to you. It means they're telling you you missed one of the VAT return or the payment. So we were giving you the warning for next 12 months. If you made a mistake again, or if you're late again, or if you are make a payment late again, we'll give you the penalty. So here, this SLN, surcharge liability, represent warning for 12 months. When you missed the deadline or the payment deadline first time. If a late payment occurs within this period, so if you do it again, a surcharge penalty is issued and the surcharge period is reset to 12 months. So when it happens second time during this 12-month period, so they will give you a penalty and the 12 month will be started from that day again. Late filing does not trigger a penalty provided the VAT is paid on time. However, it does reset the SLN. So if you are filing late, it does not trigger a penalty provided the VAT is paid, but the SLN will be reset. Only for consecutive timely return and payment can be removed SLN, that is surcharge liability notice. So if we submit the return 4 times on time, so if we make 4 consecutive timely returns, so if we submit our VAT return 4 times on time and make the payment, then this notice will be removed from our account. The penalty will be a percentage of the VAT unpaid to HMRC. It will be depend from 2 to 15% of the outstanding VAT at the due date. Penalty at 2% and 5% rate are not imposed if they are total less than £400. So when you calculate 2% and the 5%, and if you see the total figure, the penalty is coming less than 400, so you make it 0. You really don't have to pay any penalty if it is less than 400 when the penalty percentage is 2 and 5% only. Penalties At 10 and 15% rate are always charged minimum 30. So we have a little bit exemption only for the 2% and 5% if the total amount less than 400. But when the penalty rate is 10 or 15%, then even though, let's say the penalty is only coming £5, still we have to charge £30 minimum. Where the business turnover is less than 150, a surcharge penalty do not apply until the second default under the SLN is issued. So if the business have a turnover less than 150,000, so the surcharge penalty will not apply until the second default after the SLN is issued. Your reference material contain a table showing this penalty. So now we'll go to one question and try to see if we can do it together with the reference material information we have. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so here is one of the question from practice assessment 2. And this question have a question from the penalty. So let's read this question first. Say another client in B Limited for whom you prepare and submit quarterly VAT return. B Limited has an annual turnover 263,000. So this is the first thing we have to remember. So the turnover is more than 150,000. So if the turnover is more than 150,000, then we said we have to use the different percentage. So this is the first thing you have to remember. Due to the retirement of the finance director, B Limited have been late with the VAT payment. Remember that late or submit return is the same thing. Both will give us the surcharge liability and the penalty. They are in surcharge period. So they are already late and they're already in surcharge period. And the surcharge period is for the 12 month. We don't know when it is started, but we know it is for 12 month. The first default within the surcharge period was registered for the quarter ended 31st of January 2021. So that's my first default number 1. That means after the period started, I did it again. So within 12 months, I paid late or I submitted return late. So that's my first default. Remember that first surcharge period because of the late payment or because of the late filing. And after the surcharge period, within 12 months, if we late again, then I'll get my first default. And the first default was registered quarter ended 31st of January 2021. So when I start my first default, from that day, I'll have another 12 months because the surcharge period will be now restated. So surcharge liability notice will be reset to another 12 months from the first default date. So this is very important to understand it. First, we have a default period, and within default period, if we become default again, so within the surcharge period, if we become default again, that is first default, and the SLN will be reset to another 12 month. So from quarter ended 31st of January, that's my first default registered. That means then quarter ended April, July, October, so it will be for another 12 month. Okay, so if I late again after this 31st of January, I'll get more penalty. Even for this one, for the first default, I'll get the penalty. Select the penalty that will apply to be limited for each of the following VAT quarter, where the return have been submitted on time, but the payment have not been made on time. So we have submitted the return on time, didn't late for submitting the VAT return, but we didn't make the payment on time, or we didn't make the full payment on time. Could be anything. Now we have to remember one thing. First, we understand the surcharge started here, and within 12 months, we become the default. So you understand that's my first default. That is quarter ended, 31st of January. That means after January, we have February, March, April. So that's my second default. And then May, June, July, that's my third default. And August, September, October, that's my fourth default. It's very important to understand it. Now we're going to look at our reference material to quickly have a look. What is the table said? So let's have a look. So the table we have for the VAT, you can see here. So it says a default is recorded if a VAT return is not filed by the deadline or the full payment is not paid by the deadline, both. On the first default, a 12-month surcharge period is commenced. So this is already started, the surcharge period. That's my first default. If another default is made during the time, surcharge period is extended for further 12 months. So when I have a first default, that is quarter ended 31st of January, from here another 12 month is restated. So remember that that's my first default, 31st of January, because the surcharge started already before that. Say the penalty may be applied. A surcharge means the penalty, and the penalty will depend how much is the VAT outstanding. Now let's look at the table. We have default within surcharge period. Default within the surcharge period. So when you have a surcharge, remember that we only have the surcharge when we already missed one deadline. So within this period, 31st of January, that's my first default register. So that's my first. And my turnover is more than 150,000 because it's 263,000. So I have 2%. No surcharge if it is less than 400. But for the 31st of January 2021, on my first default, I have no idea how much was the VAT. The question didn't tell us anything about it. So there will be no penalty I have to consider because they said consider only the next 3 quarters. So you don't have to worry about the first because we don't know how much was the VAT. The second one we have here, that one, 30th of April 2021. And if we have a second default, it's a 5%. No surcharge if less than 400. So let's have a look. 5,100 we have total. And if we do 5% of that, so 5,100 times 5%, and that give us 255. So if they give us 255, we cannot take it because if it is less than 400, we ignore that. So it's less than 400, and we said we'll make it 0. We don't have to put any penalty for that. That's my second default. On the third default, we have 31st of July, and on the third default, it says 10% or 30%, whichever is more. So we have 180. So 180 multiply 10%. And that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multiplied 10%, and that gives me 18. 18 times 5%, 180 multipli So we said either 10% or 30. Which one is more? So 18 or 30. So 30 is more. So we take 30 here. And finally, you have 31st of October. That's my fourth default period. And it's a 15% or 30. Which one is more? So 2700 we have here. Multiply 15%. 405 or 30. Which one is more? So 405 definitely more. We take 405. And that's how we have to carry on. If we have a fifth or if we have a more, we'll carry on that way. Okay, so you can see the maximum percentage will be 15. So if you have a fifth default or sixth default, we cannot take more than 15. So it will be 15% or 30. Which one is more? So we'll carry on that. So this question is very important. So normally one question will be in the exam from the penalty, and you have to be very careful you understand it so that you can get the full marks from this question. It's a 3 marks question. If you understand it, it's not difficult to get. Thank you very much.